Welcome to today's episode of the Water Prairie Chronicles. We have an exciting show for you today as we take a tour of the new location for Gigi's Playhouse, Raleigh, and sit down with Michelle and Matthew Schwab to discuss Down syndrome. They'll share their personal experiences and insights and help us understand the unique challenges and joys of raising a child with Down syndrome. From medical care to education to social interactions, we'll cover a wide range of topics in our conversation. Michelle and Matthew have a wealth of knowledge and experience to share, and we're honored to have them on our show. Gigi's Playhouse is a nonprofit organization that provides support, resources, and programs for individuals with Down syndrome and their families. The new facility for Gigi's Playhouse Raleigh is truly impressive, and we're excited to take you on a tour to show you what they have to offer. So sit back, relax, and join us for this informative and inspiring episode as we explore Gigi's Playhouse Raleigh and learn from the Schwabs about the beauty of Down syndrome. This is our first interview on the topic of Down syndrome, and we were able to sit down with Michelle and Matthew after our tour to ask a few questions and to help us understand it better. Out of respect for those that I am speaking with, I like to find out how we should refer to different disabilities and special needs. So I started out by asking what terminology I should use when I refer to someone with Down syndrome. And I want our listeners to know, as they're meeting friends in the community, what is the most respectful way to refer to someone with Down syndrome? And I've seen it written different ways. It's down and not downs, is that correct?
That's correct.
So there's no S on the down?
That's correct.
And is the D is capitalized and syndrome is lowercase?
Yes. Correct.
And why is that way?
It is in typical, if you are doing if it's on a sign or something like that, like Down Syndrome Achievement Center,
Right.
It would all be, the D and the S would both be capitalized. Right. But if you're talking about it, because Down is the man's name who discovered it.
Okay.
John Langdon Down.
Yep.
Okay.
In the 1800s.
Oh, wow. Okay, I was wondering how long it had been an official diagnosis, so it's been a long time.
That's why.
We continued the conversation by talking about some of the common characteristics of Down syndrome. Specifically, what is Down syndrome?
Down syndrome is the most common genetic disability.
Let's say condition, the most common genetic condition.
Genetic condition is one of the ones in the intellectual developmental disabilities spectrum of disabilities, because it only mainly affects the mentality.
There is always some kind of cognitive impairment, right? What are some of the other markers?
So we have shorter statures, wider hands, and small ears, and almond-shaped eyes, hard defects for some, or
about 50%.
About 50% of those with Down syndrome have those. And there are three types of Down syndrome. There's mosaicism and translocation, which are the least common of the types, and there's the most common one, which I have, is trisomy 21, and that's why March 21st is significant in October, because of 321 and Down syndrome related companies or that have any intention to celebrate that World Down Syndrome Day in October.
Probably 95% of people who have Down syndrome have trisomy 21.
Okay.
It's just a fluke, it just happens.
And that's the only one that I've heard of. So the
That's
first thing you
it's
mentioned
almost
was
everybody.
Mosaicism.
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 But for short,
okay.
it's mosaic.
Okay, and then what was the second one?
Translocation, and those two are the least common of the types.
There are a couple of percentage, and mosaic Down syndrome is when not all of your genes have the extra chromosome. Could be 5% of them. 10. So it can happen anytime during development. So depending on when your cells are splitting, they wouldn't all have it.
Okay.
It's interesting because I mean, I don't know this, but I do know this, that there are people walking around who have it, who don't know, who've never been diagnosed. They have to be.
Well, because
you wouldn't
the
know.
features would not be the same.
That's
depending
correct.
on what was named.
That's
Okay.
correct. And we know a
Okay.
few. And their abilities typically, they have some different abilities. They're
Right.
maybe not as well. You wouldn't know
Right.
sometimes. And then translocation, if I remember correctly, it comes from a parent. It's inherited somehow. I
So
don't
there is a
understand.
genetic factor.
Yep.
For that one.
Also very very rare.
Okay. And then so
Summing 21.
trisomy 21, right?
Yes.
Okay, we'll make sure. And I'll look this up to make sure that I print it right.
And
on there.
it really is almost everybody.
Okay, and that's where it's the 21st chromosome. Is that right?
Like,
Which is what?
Extra copy.
The third copy of chromosome 21, because in neurotypical people like my mom, they only have 2 copies of chromosome 21.
Of all of them.
Of all of them, and then there's ones with trisomy 21 Down syndrome where the 2 copies of trisomy 21 makes another copy, makes a third.
Okay.
That's the lucky few.
Right.
We have the.
And what do you know? What the estimated percentage of the population is?
Oh,
that
you
has-
know, I do know that somewhere.
I think Down syndrome is probably, if not one of the largest, largest ones in the disability realm.
1 out of 700 kids are born a year with Down syndrome.
Okay.
In the U.S.
Right.
And there would be a whole lot more if people were not prenatally diagnosed.
Right. Right.
That's
I asked Michelle what she could tell us about early testing during pregnancy and if a diagnosis happens at birth or sometime later when prenatal testing doesn't indicate a child might have Down syndrome. Well, and that was what I wanted to ask too. So diagnosis, I know from when I was pregnant we were given the options for different testing and we opted not to because to us that wasn't an issue. The risk to us was greater than
No,
we were going to
something.
meet our child when we met our child.
Yeah.
But for those who don't do the testing like us, is it obvious at birth, or do doctors know what they're looking for right away?
in my experience. I've actually known a few, probably fewer than 5 people in the last 25 years who went home with their baby and had no idea until weeks or sometimes
Because the
months
face is so
later.
puffy, it's like
Yeah,
this.
but it's pretty rare. I mean, it's
Right.
pretty obvious. We didn't know. He was my first. We didn't know before he was born. But it's funny because all of the markers, the low tone, he was like a Raggedy Ann doll.
Okay.
And we commented on his teeny tiny fingers and his teeny tiny ears, and look at this little gap between his toes, and he was floppy like a Raggedy Ann doll. All markers. And here I am going, oh, look how cute this is.
Right.
And 4 hours later, the doctor comes in and goes, yeah, we think he has Down syndrome. So. And I had the AFP, that original, the blood test or whatever it was,
Right.
and it was normal, but that happens all the time.
And so ultrasound heart
Didn't
was
show
fine,
anything.
no problem.
If you look back at it now, knowing, you could go, oh, yeah, maybe they should have called this one. But
I think a lot of us as moms, we see things later. It's like, well, the signs were there, but we didn't know what we were looking at.
correct. And so we didn't do any further testing. I have 2 other boys, and we were like, it is what it is.
Right,
And
right.
clearly the testing isn't necessarily ready.
I've heard parents of children with Down syndrome refer to their children as the lucky few and wondered why the term is used. I found out as Matthew shared some statistics with me. Contrary to what I had been told when I was expecting my own children, Down syndrome doesn't seem to be much more of a risk for older mothers than it is for younger mothers.
I believe there's a statistic that says like 51% is more probable of 51% of individuals with Down syndrome are born to parents under the age of 35. So it's more probable from that
Right.
that way. But aside from that,
Well, yes, it don't, you always heard it's old moms, right, have the kids, but it's really not true when you factor in that more women that are younger women are having the babies. So that's not one of the factors anymore.
One of the challenges I've had in coming up with a slogan for the podcast has been whether to use the term disability or special needs. And each time I ask for input, I get an equal number of responses in favor of both of them. The same question comes up when we ask about person first language or disability first language. Michelle commented on the topic, and I was glad she had done so.
The one thing that when you were talking about using the proper terminology. The one thing that you're already naturally doing is using people first language. A person with Down syndrome instead of a Downs man, or so that's the one
Having
thing.
the child.
Right. We don't get. I mean, personally, our family uses it as a teachable moment.
Right.
I don't. It's a word. What, you know, if you goof, I feel like most people are not intentionally malicious.
I think
hurtful.
you're right on that.
You just don't know. You don't know what you don't know.
But I figured if we can address it openly with this, then
sure.
hopefully a parent who is in an emotional moment isn't having to now explain it
That's right.
to someone else who cares about them but doesn't know that what their words are saying is hurting.
Yep.
And
I think that's a great way to look at it.
I've also found that the terms, and I saw that you were correcting him when he was using disability. So what is your preference on that?
Well, for us personally, I'm okay with the word disability, but somebody saw it in one of his PowerPoints and said, you know, we could use the word condition instead of disability. And I'm like, if that makes you feel better,
Right.
we can use condition.
I go back and forth between special needs and disabilities,
Yep.
and depending on who I talk to,
Yeah.
my kids both are fine with both terms.
So are we.
It's it just
It is what it is.
It is, and you get to the point where it is what it is. We are who we are. We can get stuck here, or we can move on to whatever's next.
Just be nice to my kid
Exactly.
and have high expectations. Right?
And awareness is a big piece of it. And,
Right.
and I feel like that's what a lot of these conversations will do. Is, I mean, like, so for me personally, I'm learning as we're talking here. It's not that I don't want to know, I just haven't had the opportunity to have this kind of conversation before. So I appreciate that.
And most people are, myself included, you're nervous to ask the question.
Right.
So you don't want to offend somebody by asking the question, so then you just don't learn and you don't know. Right?
When you had made the comment, or actually you had made the comment that with Down syndrome you have it on your face, so it's identifiable. But you know, do you find that people want to avoid you and not engage? Do they come and just ask questions, or does it even an issue? Do they just you're meeting someone, they don't bring it up at all?
I mean, there have been times when I was younger when they do talk to me like I was a kid, but now, I mean, they don't do that, but they kind of almost do that in a way where I'm not completely treated that way.
For example, sometimes if we go somewhere, if we are at a doctor's office or something, they will automatically look to me, and and so I just turn to him. He's perfectly capable of answering his own questions and doing all of that stuff. So is that what you're talking about? That kind of thing?
Yes, it's more like the social interactions and a little bit of the workplace interactions, because there's prejudice with the employers, either because they know of what Down syndrome is, but they're too nervous to know what it is, and too nervous on how it would affect payroll, budgeting, and other aspects of the business, and it kind of depends on how competitive the business is.
The next questions I had were about medical care. I wondered what some of the medical care needs might be for a child with Down syndrome. Matthew started by explaining that some might have a heart defect.
Heart defect.
Is it a defect?
Yes.
Yeah, and it's a couple of different ones. He didn't have it, so I'm not very well versed in that, but they almost, about 50% have some heart defect.
Okay.
The number's got to be huge that have surgery and are fine.
Right.
I know a couple who have a pacemaker, but honestly, they do the surgery and they're fine.
Do you know if it's usually a one and done, or is it like a repeated
no,
as they
I
go
believe
over?
it's a one and done.
Okay.
Another field of medical assistance is orthopedics and orthotists, because naturally with low muscle tones we don't have defined muscles in our body.
Not quite.
I mean, but we do have a lot of tons of loose ligaments, so that's why we go to an orthopedist and an orthotist, where because some of us with Down syndrome have pronation, and these are UFOs, like orthotists and pediatricians, definitely, general practitioners.
Right, so your specialist would be more the orthopedic doctor that you're working with.
Yes.
Pediatrician,
There's
everyone's gonna
often
be working
vision
with,
problems.
or vision, right?
Yes.
He should wear hearing aids because he's had fluid in his ears because the ear canals are really tiny, so that's sometimes an issue. feeding, because of the low tone, is sometimes
I wondered about
a challenge. Breastfeeding is sometimes a challenge. They can do it, but it's sometimes a challenge.
So the low muscle tone is a condition that's there from the beginning, but with therapy and with exercise, does the muscle tone
Now it's
build?
always low,
low.
and it's a resting muscle tone. Like he could
Okay.
build. He has muscles. He can do this, and he's got guns.
Right.
So when his muscles are active, they're fine. It's the resting muscles
Okay.
just kind of melt. They just
So your joint stability would be affected.
it is. But again,
Yes.
it's a range, just like with everybody else, just like with the cognitive ability. There is, I mean, it's just like in the typical population, cognitive wise, right? All the way
Right.
from
Yep.
whatever to all the way up.
We have an average for a reason.
That's right. That's right. And it's the same exact thing, just shifted
Okay.
in the Down syndrome.
Since Matthew was open to sharing information with me, I asked him about his experience growing up. We were talking about cognitive growth, and I asked if he needed more time to reach some of the milestones growing up. He and Michelle chimed in to help me understand what Matthew's path has been. And with that shift, talking about the cognitive abilities here, so you're carrying on a full conversation here. No deficits.
God knows.
No,
Are there-
no
Hold
deficit at all.
Are there delays though, as far as did it take you longer to reach some of those milestones as
Every
a child?
single one.
Or did it take you longer to get to the point where you were reading independently?
Do you know the
Can
answer
you
to
remember
that?
I mean, the only part that I do know is that when my mom first told me I had Down syndrome and I was in first grade, and she had me repeat first grade only once. So I was graduated in 2016, but me being held back, I graduated a year later in 2017.
So spending some extra time in those foundational
Yes.
years to get ready.
Yes.
So
Okay.
there was, I would say, second kid, and I knew what the progression should
Right.
be, but he was, I would say that reading was his strength.
Okay.
So he excelled at it, and so it was not as big a deficit for him as some other things were. Gross motor was a much bigger deficit for him.
Okay.
Probably because he was very late even in the Down syndrome community. He was very late to walk.
Because then crawling and walking is delayed for the majority of the kids.
Yep.
Yes.
Almost
From what I've seen.
everything is delayed.
So it's not that you're not going to get there; it's just going to take longer to get there.
Right. For most
Yes.
for most things. Correct.
And
Yep.
I was going to say, even delay in speech, like
Right.
I did sign language
Okay.
until I was about like 2 years old, and then 3 years old I started talking.
Okay.
5 years old.
I knew what he knew. You know,
Right.
so it helped
Yeah,
me.
true.
And it was cool. We didn't do any ASL. We did signed exact English. So it was just they gave signs,
we
gave
did a
ideas,
sign.
did that kind of thing. Where his sign for my mother was this because she had curly hair. Okay, we took it and ran. Whatever, we'll take it. He uses it consistent.
Right,
He was
yeah.
talking to us.
The idea was communication.
That's right. And so
Yeah.
as he learned words, he gave up the.
Before we finished, I wanted to make sure I asked about new parents who want to get connected with Gigi's Playhouse.
Go to gigsplayhouse.org, which is the main website, and then there's a part on the national website they can look at, like locations across
Okay,
the country,
good.
how to start one, and it's listing one. So, and they go to it's listing one, like for example, Charlotte.
Just where they look at the list of existing
Yes,
playhouses.
and they go
So
to
there's a directory
there
there.
is.
Okay,
yes,
good.
There is.
and then they can go on there and see what that playhouse offers.
Excellent. And do you have any advice for parents,
For new parents,
for new parents?
your baby is a baby first, and that's really, that's the best piece of advice. Is just treat them like a baby, love them, and then
True.
find the resources as you need them.
Excellent. Excellent. As we wrap up this podcast episode, Steve and I want to express our gratitude for the opportunity to learn about the incredible work being done by Gigi's Playhouse for the Down syndrome community. We were truly impressed by their dedication and support for individuals and families, and we encourage everyone to check out gigisplayhouse.org to see how you can get involved. Even if there isn't a Gigi's Playhouse location in your area, they offer online options for connection and support. By supporting Gigi's Playhouse, you can make a meaningful impact in the lives of individuals with Down syndrome. We also want to thank Matthew and Michelle Schwab for sharing their experiences and insights with us. We learned so much and are grateful for their willingness to be a part of this episode. For those of you who want to learn more about Matthew, we'll include his contact information in the show notes. And if you're listening to this on the audio platform, we encourage you to check out our video on YouTube, where you can see a tour of Gigi's Playhouse Raleigh. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you on the next episode.